Hello.
Hey.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to 3D Art Career Sprint. This is the first session, and it's on how to get your foot in the studio door with no industry experience. And we put on these workshops to help you start and progress your career as a 3D artist. I'm joined with Brad Myers today. Welcome, Brad.
Hey, everybody.
Lead character artist at Probably Monsters. So this is the second time we're running the 3D Art Career Sprint, and we host a bunch of boot camps and sculpting challenges, and we're also a 3D art school. And many of our students are here at the event. They've signed up, which is awesome. And my name's Hannah, and I'm Art Heroes community host. Today at the session, we're going to be talking about what's the road to success as a 3D artist. Like, how do you map this out for yourself? How do you get work experience as a junior? And how to score your first job as an entry-level artist. Stay for the end because we'll be raffling off a scholarship for Toonie Characters program.
Sweet.
Okay, so Brad, over to you.
Yeah, so is my screen showing here right now?
No, I'll add it. There we go.
Can you see it now, everybody? Yeah? Good? Okay, so I have a quite the PowerPoint presentation, so you're going to see my PowerPoint skills right now. Okay, ready? Here we go. So, okay. No? Okay, that's not good. All right, just kidding. So what is this? I'm Brad Myers. I'm a principal character artist. I've been working in games for about 15 years. So full disclosure, I'm planning on using my slides here quite a bit as a crutch because I haven't done a lot of these online presentations yet, but so this will be my little safety net. But I promise you that I have useful information here, so just bear with me. So what is this? School for Ants? This is getting your foot in the studio door with no past experience and maybe more. Smiley face. So this is an image from Google of your typical video game studio, right? This is video games on it. Let's go to the next one. Who is this for? So obviously this is for people who are trying to break into the video game industry, but specifically for artists because I can speak to them most directly. If you are an artist and you still want to stick around, I think I have some general advice for you as well. And the maybe more bit is for people who are already working in the video game industry and are trying to move up the corporate ladder, so to speak. So there's some stuff about that is not super obvious that I'm going to cover. And even if you aren't in the game industry yet, like this is information that will help you in the future, at least I'm hoping. So you have this boy showing you the way into the game studio, and these are your working conditions, of course. You all know about that, of course. Come play with us. So this got dark pretty quickly, but the reality is, personally, I've had smooth sailing navigating the turbulent game industry waters. So I can definitely share my experience with you on that. And the cool thing is this is a chance for you all to get insider knowledge about a lot of stuff that you won't really see with your precious Google searches. Presentation overview. So this is like the order of how I want to cover things in today. So I'm going to go over my experiences and give you advice along the way. Start out with my journey breaking into the games industry, and then general tips and advice about that. Then a short break for QA. Should have at least a few questions if you all have any at that time. And then we'll continue my journey after breaking into the games industry. And then work smarter, not harder. Well, work pretty hard too. And then QA for all things. Let's talk about feelings, maybe not. You decide. Smiley face, of course. Growing up, so the beginning times. Like a lot of you, I was mostly into video games and art. and I grew up with the OG Nintendo. It was my brothers and sisters who were older than myself, so I was fortunate enough to inherit that original Nintendo. Then after that, the SNES, of course, and I eventually bought an N64 years later with money that I earned from my paper route. That's where all my money went to. And the most nostalgic thing for me was the N64 Ocarina of Time era. If I was playing video games, if I was not playing video games or playing sports with the neighborhood kids, I was probably drawing, painting, working with clay. And some of my earliest memories, I had a small table in my family room, and I would just be doing art stuff on there all the time. And I remember specifically making my own Mega Man characters, my own versions, maybe like something really sweet, like a Pencil Man or something like that, right? But then came foosball. You guys know Bobby Boucher? Remember that guy? That's what I did for a little bit. Yeah, so football became my main focus for a while, like maybe around high school or so, and then after that. And it sort of derailed my progress a bit as an artist. But I took a bunch of art classes anyways and excelled in those art classes. And I'll save you the details on football. But long story short, I went to junior college to play and eventually landed a football scholarship to play at Wingate University in North Carolina. At Wingate, I didn't have the best experience on that team, and I realized that I wasn't going to turn pro. So I sort of gave up on that dream of becoming a pro football player. This is a guy here from Wingate, and I don't know who he is. This is just what I found on the internet, but he's probably way younger than me, right? But fortunately, this is not about football. The interesting thing is, while I was at Wingate, I purchased a video game magazine, and I don't know if there's anybody do that anymore, but there was a advertisement in there for the University of Advancing Technology. And that's sort of like when everything clicked for me. And I realized that I could maybe make a living out of working in video games. And so at that point, I formulated a plan. And I decided to move back to my hometown of Buffalo and finish my degree, my bachelor's in computer science at Buffalo State here. Excuse me. And then I moved, and then the plan was to go to UAT in Tempe, Arizona for a degree in multimedia and game design. So with 2 bachelor degrees, how could I fail, right? What could go wrong? So LinkedIn here, this is a symbol of job prospects I'm using in this case. And I actually followed through on my plans, and I got a bachelor's in computer science at Buffalo State and another bachelor's at UAT. And I took school really seriously at UAT, and I graduated with a 4.0 GPA and with 2 degrees and probably one of the best portfolios in my graduating class. I bet you can guess what happened next. That's crickets, right? It's Jiminy Cricket. Yeah, so he's mocking me there. What is he doing? That's because I didn't have any job prospects coming out of school with all those degrees. But I was determined to make this dream a reality. And so I got by with random work. I did some bouncing at nightclubs. And besides that, I locked myself in a room, and the rest of the time I was just sort of working on art and portfolio. I worked so hard at times, I kind of lost track of day and night for a while there. And honestly, like, it was too much and it was a little unhealthy. But over time, I did notice that I was gaining some notoriety in the forums that I participated in. I'd always post my work in progresses there. And eventually I landed my first studio gig at Escalation Studios in Dallas, Texas. And if I just rewind a little bit there, like between the time that I graduated and the time that I got my first in-studio job, there's about 2 years of working on my portfolio. And about a year into that, I started getting some freelance gigs, and I started to get some legitimate freelance jobs. You'll get all kinds, really. And one of them was at Liquid Development, and I worked on a game called Firefall, which was technically the first AAA game that I worked on. But this was my first studio gig, Escalation Studios. So thanks, Brad. Work hard, get a job. Great advice. Yes, I'm sorry. But that is true. and not super helpful yet, but I do have some strategies that will be helpful to work efficiently, because that's kind of the name of the game here. So, planning. I think planning is the most important thing you can do. 3D art is incredibly time consuming, which means making the most of your time is even more important here. When people consider planning in art, they often think about execution, making the art, right? That's your project. But there are many other factors to consider. Have a plan for learning, have a plan for networking, have a plan for building your portfolio, and have a plan for executing on a project. And in case you aren't familiar with this reference, this is the A-Team here, and they said, "I love it when a plan comes together." And this is not just like a strange family photo or something. Don't worry, there's a reason for this here. So more on planning and being organized. So I want to cover each one of those items individually, starting with planning. So this is sort of an analogy I got going here. Not planning or being organized is a little bit like playing Zelda, trying to find those pesky secrets to everybody. If you go through the map and simply light a bush on fire and then walk to the next screen, so do this off screen, that would be an incredibly inefficient way of finding them, wouldn't it? But that's exactly what you're doing if you don't have a plan. It's totally random, disorganized, and you'll probably never leave no stone unturned. So what is the best way? Well, that's for you to figure out based on your goals. But when it comes to Zelda specifically, I would probably just go, top to bottom, left to right, try each and every single one, and then move on. So think about how that analogy translates to your goals. So that's all pretty abstract. So I have some actionable items here, or ways to figure this out. So the first one, seek advice. So you're already doing that. So well done there. Develop a system. So with the advice and goals in mind, and make sure you take your time here, because you're going to be using the advice that you get. And this is really the bulk of your plan, right? Execute. That's when you're going to actually make your project. So just make sure that you're disciplined about that, because you really want to follow through on your plan. And then post-mortem. And probably most of you know what post-mortem is, but I'll just say what it is just in case. So usually a post-mortem is when at the end of your project, you think about what worked well and what didn't work well and how you can improve it for next time. So that's really important, because, and it's also oftentimes overlooked, because that's how you're going to store information in your long-term memory. And if you write it down like in Word or something, you can always reference that later, rather than having to relearn it or something. And then the last one is repeat. So right back up to the top and do it again, even better this time, right? And if you do all that, you win. Hooray, hooray. Triforce of time, I think. Yeah, probably time. Sounds right to me. Live training. So this is going to go over the learning process. I've got those 4 steps, if you remember. So the first one that I want to talk about is live training. So we got this Art Heroes page here. So you could do live training like Art Heroes. Honestly, like, I've taken a ton of learning courses, and this is one of the best experiences that I've had. And I'm not just saying that because I'm doing this, like, I legitimately feel that way. So there's others to choose from. So, but live training programs are really good. YouTube and other pre-recorded video tutorial options. Let's see where I'm at. Oh, yes. Okay, so shameless plug here. I have some of these available, YouTube things. But I will say training programs are still ideal in most cases, but these are definitely useful. And Patreon. I haven't used this myself, but I will definitely in the near future. If you can deal with zero guidelines, it's a great way to learn and network. A lot of artists are starting to use Patreon. Like they'll give you access to like recorded stuff that they do, and you can join their Discord and talk about it. which is a little bit about the next one, Discord. Art Heroes has it. It's become the standard. It's great for feedback and networking, both art school and college. So despite myself having invested so much in college, it's not that high up on my list. I still think that it has its uses, and I would say that art school specifically, and I'm talking about brick and mortar here. I think art school, like traditional art, especially, is cool if you can afford it. But when I say afford it, it's both the time of it and the cost. And the last one is, I have a feeling you know better than me. And that's just because I know that I'm sort of preaching to the choir with some of this. You all are super knowledgeable, I'm sure, and you have your own ideas. But ultimately, find something and commit to it and make sure that you get the most out of it. Unfortunately, you can't pay and have information inserted into your brain like the Matrix or something, right? So make sure that you take time to utilize what you have learned with the planning and execution phases. Okay, networking. So, so a lot of these go sort of hand in hand with learning, but I'm going to approach this now from a more networking aspect now. Art forums. So you have art forums like ArtStation, Zebra Central, Polycount, sort of kind of Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. So you can get on those and you can comment, you can message, you can contribute. Classes, you have online classes, colleges, and workshops. Workshops are pretty cool if you get a chance to do that. Discord, mentioned that before, or similar types of platforms. Twitch, maybe, I don't know, you can get crazy. LinkedIn or other job websites. There we are on LinkedIn. Also, Glassdoor is a thing. I'm not too crazy about Glassdoor because I think that the salaries there are crazy low. I think it's just sort of full of disgruntled employees, to be fair, but that is a thing also. Then we got video game conferences, GDC, been to that a few times myself, Comic-Con, IGDA, etc. Hopefully, we'll see plenty of these in the future because of the whole COVID thing and job fair. I don't know, is this outdated now? Colleges have these, but I imagine that COVID affected those as well. And then reaching out to your favorite artists. I think that some people don't feel comfortable doing this, but I do think it's a good idea. Shooting a private message to an artist on ArtStation, for example, it doesn't hurt. Like if you're just complimentary and eager to learn, they'll probably be happy to answer your questions if they have time. And disclaimer, always consider your code of conduct here. You want to be remembered as the nice guy or gal and not the jerk. Everything on the internet is recorded till the end of time. That's both awesome and scary, right? Working on your social skills is important, and the only way to improve is to practice. So get on those networks and sites and speak up. So the third one here is portfolio. This is my personal portfolio. That's me. The real portfolio. So my first bit of advice with portfolio is to make art that you love. It'll show in your art. Plus, you'll want to work on it more and you'll want to finish. Show versatility. Don't paint yourself in a corner. Increase your odds. You want more than one studio to be interested in you, ideally. Get feedback. It's important that you aren't the only one that likes your art. If you are, then it's going to be tough to get a job because it really comes down to other people's liking your art to get a job, right? Breakdowns and presentation. So show recruiters what you got. Prove you know game art, wireframe, texture sheets, time-lapse, etc. I recommend that you look online and find artists that do a good job with breakdowns. And you can model your own presentations after them. Like I've done that personally with Marlon, for example, when I was doing the Green Mile project. He does an awesome job. Next up, Put yourself in the recruiter's shoes. Does your art look like something they would make? That's important. I mean, if it is, you'd probably be a shoo-in if it's something they would make, right? Because that's what your job would be. Only show your best. Especially, this is true when starting out. It's good to show your art in general, like even if it's not complete, like work in progresses and stuff for feedback, but just make sure that you do it in a place that's not like your finished portfolio. That's something that you would send to for job applications, because you just want them to see your best work, because people often say you're only as good as your worst piece. So keep in mind that, and use other things like blogs and Instagram, stuff like that, that is not your portfolio if you want to share like more work in progress stuff. Learn something new every time. So this is one of the best ways to keep improving, I think. And personally, like I oftentimes plan my projects around just learning. So like one thing I might do is think about like, okay, I need to get better at XGen and hair. So I might make a project simply based around like, okay, what would look cool where the bulk of the work is just literally this hairstyle. And then the last one is deadlines. So deadlines are good, even if it's just on you to actually complete them, because it'll help you stay disciplined and keep things moving. Okay, next one, execution. So this is when you're going to be actually making your project, right? So by the way, this is a real work in progress of mine. This is not finished. This is supposed to be a likeness of Ryan Gosling from Blade Runner. And I'm just using this as an example to show you like a real life work in progress from me. So first point is stay organized, because this will save time in the long run. And you have the ability to reuse stuff, which is super, super helpful. You know, if you made a base mesh, that's huge, right? Get tons of reference for every kind of element. Even like people in this case would probably think, okay, I need reference for Ryan Gosling and I need reference for Blade Runner. But there's so much more to that. Like you can get reference for rendering style, like completely different stuff. You can get reference for lighting style. You get reference for the general style, you know, of the project. Is it stylized or is it realistic? You could get reference for like as a benchmark purpose. So I might find somebody's work who I think is just, you know, amazing at realistic likenesses. And I'd be like, okay, I see this guy's work. I need to try to match that. So references for everything. Okay, so set goals. This will keep you progressing. And I kind of mentioned that previously. So for example, with this guy, I could say, today I'm going to give Ryan, or not today, I'd say I give myself a week here. Give myself a week here to make Ryan Gosling some pants, because I posted him without pants and I got a lot of crap about it. So now I'm going to make him some pants. And that's a pretty solid goal, because making pants is not easy. And stay consistent. A little bit often is better than nothing. It's hard on many levels to pick a project up that you set down. And this sort of segues into the next thing, which is make lists. And so like a hit list on all the things that you want to work on, anything you can think of to make it better, right? And so then I've got a real example of my hit list for this exact project. And if you were to read this, it probably doesn't make any sense to anybody, but that doesn't matter, right? It just has to make sense to me. So having something that you actually have written down that you can check off is really, really helpful. And post-mortem. So again, the post-mortem, because it's super important and you don't want to waste time relearning stuff in the future. Okay, so this next slide, this is Polycount Forum. I don't know if you all use that too much. It might have been more popular a while back, but still there, I believe. And I wanted to speak to what I did specifically when I broke in years back. And some people do call this, like, they call this their school for art, you know, because they got a lot of feedback and they felt that it was all they really needed. Back then, there were limited options back then. So this was kind of like since I went to school, this is sort of like my graduate school for getting into the game industry. But I'm going to go through these. These are a little bit long to read, but I'll go through them. So I spent about half my time learning. Polycount and Gnomon Workshop were some of the options that I had, and half of my time was creating art. So half learning, half creating, and this is just about becoming a better artist. And so my logic was that if I create better game art than what was found in my favorite games, then how could they not hire me? And I think that that's mostly true. I was sort of a poor networker at the time. I kind of tried to brute force just with my artwork too much. So I think that did hold me back a little bit. So try not to do that like I did, because not everything that I did was right either. So with the techniques that I learned, I executed on making 3 game models of my favorite video games via concept art I found online. And I eventually became known for doing stylized stuff like Dishonored because I worked on a Dishonored themed project specifically. And so I was really inspired by the concept art from Dishonored, and I felt that the game didn't necessarily do it justice because I thought the concept art was like so painterly and cool. So my goal there was just to translate it better than what they did in the game. And I'll show you what that is exactly in a little bit here. And so I thought extensively about creating art for the jobs I wanted and what studios I was interested in might like to see. So lots of planning there. I tried to prove my versatility by tackling many different kinds of challenges in my art. And I talked about this previously, but this was to increase my chances with a large number of studios. I posted on Polycount my work in progress for honest feedback, and I met many great artists I still know today. This was a great way for me to network and for self-improvement. Polycount, I don't think, is quite like it was back then, and that could be a good thing in all reality, because it was known as being extremely ruthless. And but if you could handle some of these hard truths about your art, it did make you better. I kept my eye out for opportunities I thought I qualified for, and I would apply to those and get in touch with someone from that company if possible. So I got better at this over time, but I did struggle with this, and I initially felt like I wasn't good enough, and I would sort of delay applying for certain jobs. So be like, I'll just do a little bit more. I'll just do a little bit more, and I think that kind of did hold me back a little bit. So my advice now would be, don't shell up. It will only hinder your growth. And this one, when I failed, I tried to take it as a learning experience and a chance to do better the next time. And so this is really just about having a positive attitude. And I think that's really, really important as an artist. I know it's really hard sometimes, but trust me, being negative is a disservice to you, to everyone, including yourself. Oh, and I was going to show you those couple of pieces that I made. So this is like some art that I think helped me break into the game industry originally. It's like 15 years ago or something. So this is the 3D model, like game art, and that was the concept that I did not create this concept. That was Dishonored. So some extra notes I have here that I think are worth mentioning. I don't feel that I have any natural talents for this stuff. Believe it or not, I think talented people probably learn a lot faster than I do. If anything, I think a talent that I might have is determination. So if I put my mind to something, I have a hard time accepting failure with that. So the point I'm trying to make is that I think if I can do it, then so can you. And if you love this kind of work, it doesn't feel so hard. You'll definitely have ups and downs, but I'm telling you that anyone who's willing to put the work in can do it. Okay, so at this point, we've gotten through these first 2 steps, and I wanted to take a brief break for Q&A relating to the stuff that I spoke about, if there is any questions that people have.
Hi, I'm back. Yeah, we've got a bunch of questions. Good,
Okay,
good
sure.
time. Good time to take take a break. Cool. So the first one is from Misha, who wants to know what your perspective on making a portfolio using both personally made art and using assets or plugins for game engines. So basically, pre-made stuff in combination with your own. What's your opinion on this, on your portfolio?
Yeah, so I mean that's actually become pretty commonplace, and I would say that working with source art is pretty well accepted. It's really hard to say based on, it's very specific to your scenario. So my advice would be to probably make art. So at the end of the day, when it comes to recruiting, the recruiters just want to be sure, they want to be confident that you know how to do the work. So if you are proving in other ways that you know how to do the work, then I think that's totally fine. But if it looks like, if it feels more like, okay, there's nothing here that shows me that they can do some of these fundamental things without using that stuff, then that might be a problem. Now, if you're going like, I know that there's lighting artists and their whole job is literally just lighting other people's art. So, I mean, like in that case, it's totally cool. Like you're expected to do that. You should not be making your own art really professionally. So if you want to be a character artist and, you're, let's say you're making some stylized model and like, you purchased like the high poly off the internet or something like that, that would probably be like, you'd be like, oh, well, I did all the materials and texturing. That might be too much, like you do need to show that you can do the fundamentals there, I think. So case by case, I would say.
And I think also you said something really key here. Make the type of art that for the studio that you want to work for, because the studio is looking for the type of art that they're kind of already making,
Yeah, it's all about building confidence in your ability, really. So think about it from that standpoint. And I'm going to actually talk more about that later on in the discussion.
Cool. So we've got another question from Caitlin, who wants to know what are some of your favorite renderers to use, Brad?
Yeah, so I have used even like ZBrush. I've done some cool stuff in ZBrush, which is not even really a renderer, I would say. But I've used Unreal professionally, and I've used Keyshot as well. And I've used I use a lot of Marmoset. So that example that I showed you of Ryan Gosling was real time in Marmoset 4. So I'm a real big fan of Marmoset because it's really fast for iteration. And so I feel like that's the best way for me to sort of like get to that next step. You want to get to the next step, seeing it in the lighting of like how it might look when it's finished as soon as possible in most cases. And so that's an easy way for me to do it. And so if I were to ultimately work where I wanted to bring something into Unreal for rendering, I would probably go Marmoset first, take it to a certain point, and then Unreal towards the end. But it comes down to personal workflow, and I prefer real-time renderers since I work in video games.
And what are your thoughts on Blender? Because this is free, so it's the most accessible to entry level.
Yeah, I've done rendering. I'm actually doing rendering in Blender right now for work. Blender is awesome. Blender is so cool. Like I love the fact that the materials are set up in a way that it's like really easy to understand and to manipulate. So like if your texture isn't right, you can manipulate it so easy with like leveling and hue adjustments and stuff. So I actually really like Blender, and it's newer to me. Like a lot of us in the game industry that started out with 3ds Max and Maya, we're transitioning to Blender now. It's becoming more and more a standard. So I think Blender is a great way to go, like in all reality. And if I had to, start now and it was like, okay, do I buy a license or I get Blender? Like, hell yeah, I'm getting Blender. Like why not? It's awesome. So Blender's cool.
Yeah. Wanted to know, as a character artist, did you get hired on characters right away, or did you have to do props or lower scale 3D work first?
Yeah, so really, like I was more of a 3D generalist starting out. I'm gonna also cover that later, but I did have a lot of characters on our portfolio, maybe more than I should have had at the time. You also have to bear in mind that it was a little different than like the time that I got into video games. Studios were way smaller, and I thought, I was like, oh, if I can make a normal map, like they're gonna hire me, kind of thing. It's like if you don't know how to make normal maps, you're like living under a rock right now. So like that wasn't really true. People, you did definitely have to know how to make normal maps, but it wasn't that much after they started becoming like an everyday thing. So yeah, so I guess the point is it sort of depends really. But yeah, I think things are a little more specialized now, and it's probably a safer bet to do more like the prop route rather than go straight for characters. It's sort of a risk. I will say that getting a full-time position as a character artist is the hardest one to do. So.
And then Felicity wants to know, do you think it's easier to get your foot in the door as a lighting artist while you develop your modeling skills?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. So I know lighting artists, and I have heard their stories about how they got into the game industry. And I feel like a lot of it is, so obviously there's those senior roles where, okay, you've been doing this for a while and you're sort of a shoe-in, right? But that's not the situation here. And for a lot of folks, I understand that. And I think that based on the stories that I've heard, a lot of it has come down to like, they knew some basics and they knew somebody that was like willing to take a chance on them. So that's not like really the best advice I know, because you don't necessarily know somebody or have the ability to reach out to somebody and have them give a chance to you. Like you can't really expect that. If you really like started putting together some really cool scenes and stuff, like maybe that would be enough. I just can't, because I'm a character artist and I've done more like general stuff and environment stuff. If anything, it's hard for me to say exactly like the route for lighting. And my gut tells me there's a lot less lighters in the game industry than anything else, than like generalists and stuff like that. So I would say it might be harder, actually.
And William wants to know, how versatile was your portfolio when you were breaking in, and was it catered to a specific company, or did you show your best works with likeness stylized hard surface?
Yeah, I did a little bit of everything. I can't remember exactly what I had. I want to say that Dishonored thing was one of the main things that impressed people back then. So I definitely had props, and there's like a lot of general type art on there. It is really hard to compare that to nowadays. I do think that you need to be a little bit more specialized nowadays. So I still would recommend more like investing in more of the basics of like props, or maybe go all in on environment to start. But if it's something that like you're really passionate about, I don't ever want to tell anybody to not do something if they're passionate about it. Because I do know people that went straight to character art, for example. So it is totally possible. I will just say that like there's a much higher demand for entry level people as more like generalists. But yeah, it's tricky. And like I said, mine was kind of my portfolio was sort of all over the place. And I would say that if anything, when I got into the industry, and I would say if anything, like the best part of my portfolio was really the characters, but it's sort of a different time. So maybe we could do one more question and I'll move on. I just don't want to run out of time. Yeah.
Sure, let's go. So Polygeddon says he absolutely loves your Dead Slug model, and he wants to know which software you used to retopo.
Do you know which one is that specifically? I'm not sure. Dishonored?
The Dead Slug model on your portfolio.
Dead Slug. Not sure.
Can you confirm, Polygeddon? And I can show it here.
Okay. Dead Slug. I feel like halfway tempted to like open it up, my portfolio, and be like, what are you talking about? I'm not exactly sure. Sorry, I'm not sure which one that is.
Okay, if you confirm Polygeddon later on, I'll ask
Yeah,
Fred again.
we could always come back to it. I just want to make sure that I
Yeah.
get through this stuff because I've got some
Sure.
important information
Go ahead.
coming
Cool.
up.
All right. Back to
Yeah.
the portfolio. More questions at the end, guys. Yeah, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so you all can see that. So I'm just going to go back into this is so hopefully you all appreciate this because this is like a lot of the insider stuff that I was talking about that maybe a lot of people won't talk about in terms of working in video games. So I hope this is useful. But basically, the first project I worked on at Escalation Studios was Rage, this one here. And specifically, we worked on the vehicle deathmatch portion of that game. Escalation Studios at the time was sort of a work for hire type studio, and it had strong ties to id Software. The main person who started Escalation was somebody from id Software like very early on, and so currently this is kind of like a little demo of that to explain. So Escalation Studios, it's now called Besodic Game Studios, I believe. That happened after I left there. I was at Escalation for 6 years total, and during my time at Escalation, I worked on a few different id projects over the 6 years. So I want to talk for a moment about salary. When I was hired at Escalation, I remember the CEO saying to me, "Don't worry, we're going to start you out at X amount, and you'll move up fast." So he was saying that because I was starting out pretty low, to be fair, very low actually. So I took that as we should reevaluate after a probation period of maybe 3 months or so, which is standard in the business world. But when I asked him 3 months in, the CEO said, whoa, not yet, like that. And, too soon. And that actually made me a little bit uncomfortable. And I felt like, okay, well, maybe he's going to approach me about this raise that he spoke about when I got hired. So 2 years passed and still nothing. And so finally, there's some acquisition stuff going on at the studio. And I got this like tiny raise, and everyone at the studio got a raise at that point. I'm like, okay, I'm just never going to make a decent wage here at this rate. And I started to make it known that I wasn't super happy. And shortly thereafter, I did get a huge raise, like much bigger than I thought would be possible. And was that a coincidence? It might have been. But I'll talk about that later some more. So back to the video games we were making at Escalation. We worked on a lot of small projects after Rage, and seriously, nothing even worth mentioning right now. The next major project I worked on was Doom 4. And the irony was that I had an opportunity to work on Doom 4 when I worked for Liquid Development like years prior when I was doing that outsourcing. And excuse me, currently I was working on Firefall, and that was more exciting because the stuff that we were going to work on for Doom was like really, really boring stuff, like regular doors, like not even like cool tech doors or anything like that. So it made sense for me to continue working on Firefall, but it was just sort of like funny that like, years later it came full circle, and I ended up working on Doom 4 actually at id Software. And for those of you who don't know, Doom 4 was in production. I don't know if it was technically production, but they were working on it for like 8 years. And eventually ZeniMax was like, okay, you're going to either ship this thing or we're shutting you down kind of thing. And they're like, okay, we gotta put this together. So the time that I joined them to work on Doom was 2 years before it released. So I caught the last 2 years of that. And what I worked on specifically was something called Snap Maps. And what that was Doom 4 had like 3 aspects to it. There was a single player, the multiplayer, and Snap Maps. And Snap Maps was sort of like this like create your own video game with Doom stuff kind of editor. And it was pretty cool. Like I remember some people making some pretty neat stuff there. And then during that time, I got another really big raise, and suddenly I was making what I thought was like a very fair salary. So I was happy on that front, but it seemed evident that we were going to continue to work on snap map stuff well after Doom, because next up was Wolfenstein, and that sounds super cool. Of course, it's a big game, it's awesome. But the snap map work that I was doing felt more like a level designer and not even much like an environment artist. Like pretty much what I was doing was I was reusing and kit bashing stuff from the environment art. And so I started to feel pretty frustrated with that. Like it was holding me back artistically. And, you know, I got into games to be an artist. And I also wanted to work as a full-time character artist, and I hadn't really done that yet at this point. So yeah, I was more of like a 3D generalist, I would say. I did do some character stuff when it wasn't these big projects, but it was nothing too awesome, to be fair. So I started applying for jobs there while at Escalation towards the end there. And all the while I was working hard on my portfolio outside of work. And I never really stopped working on my portfolio, even working in the games industry. I always recommend people continue to work on something outside of work. But basically, like once I realized I was going to leave there, I started really ramping it up and working really hard outside of work. So what I learned from my experience at Escalation, I learned don't be quiet, because if you're quiet and you just do your work, you don't get rewarded, in many cases at least. Management oftentimes stop noticing you and allocates raises to higher priorities. So, I mean, that's nobody's fault really. Like, but if you're really quiet and you seem happy, then you don't feel like any urgency to give you raises. Stay engaged. Don't go heads down too much. Keep conversations going with management. Be open, honest, and professional about it. Next one. Be careful who you associate with. So this is kind of a weird one, and I only experienced it at this studio. But when I joined the studio, I was warned about a particular employee that was super negative, and he invited me to hang out with him, and he seemed like he's a fun guy, cool to hang out with, and I really enjoyed hanging out with him. But it quickly did turn negative, and suddenly I was associated with like a negative group in the studio, which didn't really help me much professionally, I felt. So, personal projects, which led me to getting my first full-time senior character artist roles. Mostly these two. Like I was drawn towards stylized stuff still. So this penguin character and more Dishonored stuff. This is more like high-res stuff here, and this was a full-on game model. So the next job that I went to, so I was in Texas and I moved to the Bay Area for a job at Cold Iron Studios. And Cold Iron was a new company that was created by the folks that broke away from Cryptic Studios, which is another Bay Area studio that has made some big stuff, I think, a while back. They're still around. I was the 8th hire there, but by the time I moved to San Jose, California, I was the 12th person or so. That was because I had a house and it took a while to move family and stuff. But I remember, actually, this is kind of a funny story. I sold my house and I called the CEO of Cold Iron. I was like, okay, so I sold my house now. This is real, right? And he's like, yeah, it's real. Don't worry. So it was definitely a leap of faith moving from Texas, which I moved originally to Texas from Buffalo, but that was like no big deal. It was just me. I was moving a family up at that point, and I had a house and stuff. So yeah. And then whenever I got to San Jose, the studio was like in this shady building above a Starbucks, which was super weird, but looking back, kind of fun. But we did eventually secure a proper location, which was really nice in downtown San Jose. So they were legit. They were just getting started out, and that's why we were there. So several months passed at Cold Iron, and all things were good. And I was working away on our own stylized IP, and that's why they hired me, because they like the stylized stuff that I did. So that kind of goes to some of those questions of, you got to put yourself in the recruiter's shoes. They saw my stylized stuff, and they felt like it spoke to them, right? However, at Cold Iron, trouble was a-brewing. The parent company was located in China, so the company that funded Cold Iron at the time, and I don't think I can ever talk about that publicly, like who they were, but they were underwater and they overextended themselves in the US and needed to sell us. So they essentially expanded really quickly to the US. And one of the companies that they were betting on that was going to do really well did really shitty. And they're like, okay, actually, let's just sell all this stuff. And so that meant that we were likely to get shut down. And the owners put us up for sale to the highest bidder, which doesn't always happen. It's actually kind of rare that that happens, that somebody decides to buy your studio if it's relatively new like that. But fortunately, Fox saw something in us in our game, and they did purchase us. So we were owned by Fox Next. That's when I worked for Fox. And they loved our game, but they said, how about you make Aliens instead? So as a character artist, all the stuff that I was working on had to get thrown out the window. And I started to make Aliens, like the movie Aliens, right? And start all over again. But I got over that fast because Aliens is super, super cool. So I was happy with that. So this is some of the Aliens characters that I made for that game. This is just the main alien drone. This is a video game model, low poly and all that stuff. Yeah, so as many of you know, Fox eventually was purchased by Disney, and that started happening about halfway through production on this Aliens game. Later, they called it Aliens Fireteam Elite. By the way, I didn't stay there until they shipped the game, but so that was almost a surprise to me that they shipped, because things looked a little bit unsure for a while with Disney. And the reason why I say that is because it took Disney about a year to actually acquire all Fox. And when they got us, they sort of got our game studio by accident. Disney was mostly interested in the 20th Century Fox stuff, like movies and film. And they had a reputation for selling off video game studios at that time. They had Disney Infinity, which bombed, unfortunately. I've got like all those Disney Infinity models because they're amazing. But I've never even played the game myself. So I have the models, haven't played the game. So maybe that says something about it. So yeah, Disney doesn't want anything to do with video games, at least at the time. And we were all fairly certain they would sell us once they owned us. And that really did happen. So I didn't feel secure in my job, and I started looking elsewhere. So what did I learn from this experience working at Cold Iron? I learned to be firm with production. Production pressured us a lot to commit to timelines I was not comfortable with, and I decided that I wouldn't put that sort of stress on myself in the future. It's sort of a vicious cycle when you allow that to happen if you don't sort of stand up for yourself. And it wasn't okay for them to do that. And this is the only time I felt pressure like that from production. So I don't know, is it like commonplace? But if you are working in games, just be sure that you're realistic with them, because you can't sign up for something that's not possible, right? Next one is be assertive and involved. Again, I didn't speak up enough when I was there, and I should have made better use of my time in the one-on-ones that I had with the lead there, or the art director actually. And I could have came bringing notes and topics to cover and not sugarcoat things too much. Stay organized. So a complaint that some of my coworkers had was that I wasn't naming things properly or doing check-ins enough. And it made it hard for them sometimes to work with my source art, because we're all a team at the end of the day. And so that was something that I knew I had to get better at, because you want your coworkers to think positively of you and want to work with you in the future. Like, I feel like if anything, the strongest connections you want when you're working is your coworkers, because it's a relatively small industry in reality. And the fourth one, cost of living and self-worth. I seriously underestimated the cost of living in California, having moved from Texas, and I was losing money month to month and falling in debt, even though I was living modestly, just based on my salary. So don't forget that the point of work is to make money. If work is costing you money, that doesn't really make sense, right? So it doesn't mean you need to like make bank or anything, but you have to at least be breaking even. So there's nothing wrong with investing in your career. I did see it as an investment in my career at the time. I didn't know it was going to be like that, but it did sort of feel worth it anyways. But you really want, to see that light at the end of the tunnel and know that things are going to get better. There's no certainty that anything would happen for me there, in retrospect. So the next place that I joined was Sledgehammer Games. Call of Duty, let's go. Right. So at Sledgehammer Games, I joined there during a transition period. The two studio heads, Michael Condrey and Glenn Schofield, they split and made their own studios, 31st Union and Striking Distance, respectively. I was hired as a character artist, not senior at that time. And when being brought on, I was told it was sort of the elephant in the room. And basically, like, because I was previously senior, the fact that they wanted to hire me on as a mid-level character artist was sort of like a demotion in a way. And so my first reply to that was like, well, I don't think this is going to work for me because, money's tight for me right now. And I just don't think if I'm getting demoted kind of, then I'm certainly not going to make enough money. But then they're like, don't worry, we're going to give you X amount. And it was way more than I was currently making. And then I was just kind of like, okay, call me whatever you want. I don't care. At one point when I joined the team, because they were going through this transition, a lot of people left the studio and it was sort of a skeleton crew. Myself, the lead, and a character head specialist. But it was an opportunity for me to take on a bunch of leadership roles, despite having the mid-character artist title. So we also had this underground stylized game that we were working on. And they saw me as the ideal candidate for this reason, because I sort of proved that I could do realistic stuff with the aliens. And of course, I've got lots of stylized stuff in my portfolio. And during that time, we also shipped, this is within the first year, we shipped Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War. And we were the support studio for that. So that's that one. To be fair, I had minimum contributions to that game, but I was credited for it because I did make a few things on it. So my name was in the credits. And my role on that game was small because I was pretty heads down, mostly working on the stylized game for Sledgehammer. But then they eventually shelved that game because we secured the lead studio role on Call of Duty Vanguard, which was the next installment of Call of Duty. This is the second World War II Call of Duty Sledgehammer Games would make. So that's this one. And so I worked on that game, and I actually had a huge part in making those characters. I also was involved in hiring other character artists, training new hires, documentation, and being a go-to person on the team. And a lot of that was because at that point I had been at the studio longer than almost everybody else on the character team. So it was great because I was doing some lead type stuff at a major studio, but I still wasn't even considered senior at that point. And after we shipped Vanguard and I had been at Sledgehammer Games for 3 years, I knew they were going to officially make me a senior character artist, and they did do that. But it did feel a little too late for me at the time because I felt like because I was doing lead work, maybe I deserved a lead title at that point. And I had other studios that were reaching out to me with offers for lead roles. So what I learned from my time at Sledgehammer Games, and remember that was 3 years. I learned that moving up in many studios is hard or impossible. It's hard to move up in some companies, and you can easily get stuck in your hired role. And it's easier to make moves jumping to different studios. And that's honestly just a kind of a problem with a lot of businesses in general, where it takes many, many years to get promoted within the company, but then you could like leave the company, take a job somewhere else, and come back and they'd hire you in a higher role. It's just something that happens sometimes, which doesn't make sense, and they should probably fix. But that's the reality of the situation. Politics in studios are the worst. So yeah, Sledgehammer Games is owned by Activision, and that puts me under the Blizzard umbrella. And I'm sure a lot of you have heard about a lot of the gross stuff in the media there, and that did trickle down to us at Sledgehammer, even though we were sort of twice removed from a lot of that. No regrets. So it was a major stepping stone for me to work at Sledgehammer, and I learned a ton and grew a lot. And I also made too many close friends to count. And for a studio that size, I was always super impressed with how cool everybody was. So overall, a great experience for me. So I did want to take a moment to talk about my experience looking for jobs at that time, at the tail end of Sledgehammer. So I was asking only for leadership roles at that point because I had my mind set on that, and truthfully, a pretty high salary. And one of the things about that is if you're asking for like higher amounts, sometimes you'll like actually hear what a studio is willing to pay because it might be over their top amount. So maybe this is something for down the road, or if you're already in the game industry, but that's a way to figure out like what their true top is. Because if you ask for something much lower, typically they'll just be like, yeah, that's cool, and hire you on. And it might be like, oh, they would have paid you like 20 grand more or something, you know? So then it came down to Respawn and Probably Monsters for me. Respawn seemed to be stalling. I thought I had a really good chance with them, but Probably Monsters gave me a really great offer and I couldn't refuse. So that's all the business nonsense there. I joined Probably Monsters. Most of you, I'm sure, haven't heard of them, but they recently secured the largest fundraising in video game history, 250 million or more, I think. And so they're absolutely legit, and big things should be coming. Probably Monsters is a parent company, actually, like a lot like Activision is to Sledgehammer, and I work for the child studio of Probably Monsters, which is not yet publicly announced. So our team is very small still. Officially, my current title is Principal Character Artist. It's on the exact same level as Lead Character Artist. The main difference is I make art more than I manage. But at this stage with the team size, it makes more sense for me right now. So I'm super happy to be at the studio. I moved from the Bay to Seattle for this job pretty recently. And I think I've been here for 6 months now. And my biggest fear was really the downgrade in the weather-wise from the Bay, because I love the weather in the Bay. But actually, I've been pleasantly surprised by that. It doesn't rain as much as you think. So I feel like I did make the best choice for myself right now, and very happy where I'm at. So the next one, this is kind of like that last one. Work harder, not smarter. That can't be right. All right, got some PowerPoint tricks here for you. Work smarter, not harder. That's right. Okay. Uh-oh, looks like a COVID attack. So I wanted to take a moment to talk about COVID because it had a big impact on the game industry. All industries, for that matter. Yes, the old COVID. It's a very political topic, but I'm just going to talk about how it relates to the video game industry. There we go. Video games tend to do even better in a time of crisis. This is true. It can be an expensive form of entertainment, and people have more downtime. Remote work is now a real option. Studios used to say it can't be done for you to be remote, and now out of necessity, it has been proven to be a viable option. So that's great, right? Everybody likes that, I think. Demand for artists has increased. Higher demand of games with more content and bigger scopes. As tech evolves, so do specializations. And I think this is not necessarily a COVID-specific type note, but it's more like a time thing, right? Like we're moving into the future. But I wanted to mention that, when things started out, programmers used to make the art a lot of the times. You had those 8-bit like little links and stuff that programmers would typically make. But now we've evolved to the point we have hair specialists and destruction artists and stuff like that. So super specialized now. Most studios are considering hybrid work options. So this is great for work-life balance and being flexible for families' needs. Everybody likes that too. Many logistical challenges we face. So this is more like on the company side of things rather than us personally, I would say. But do you have two PCs, like one at work and one at home? Are you full-time remote? Do you hire in other countries? What do benefits look like if you're from another country? Like if you're in Germany, you have free healthcare, but over here you need healthcare, so that can be super confusing, and taxes and stuff like that. What does the future hold? So nobody really knows, obviously. I definitely don't know. But I'll tell you, I'm not worried about AI taking my job anytime soon. And if anybody has questions about that, I can speak to that more, but I'm fairly confident about that. The dreaded interview. I think this is an important one for everybody who is looking to break in, especially. And at this point, we mostly talked about getting noticed and building your skills, which in my opinion is the most important thing and why I've focused on it so much. Believe it or not, I think resumes are not super important in my opinion, particularly for new people. And if you needed a resume setup idea, like you could literally just like go on my ArtStation, look at my resume and copy it like how it's formatted and put your own information in there. Because the main thing that I look at when I'm looking at resumes personally, when it comes to interviewing, is I'm looking at work history and I'm looking at what programs you use. And so if you don't have much work history, like I don't know what I put, like, you worked at a grocery store or something, not to like knock that or anything, but I would mostly put like relevant work history in terms of the video game industry, because you need to see how that correlates to the job is really what you're after. But one thing you could put is maybe you worked on a mod or you did some class assignment or something. You could say that, you took some Art Heroes courses and you did a good job and this is what you made. Like those are legit things to mention on there for work history, I would say. And then, like I mentioned, the programs as well. So that being said, resume should be pretty straightforward. And applying is also pretty straightforward. Like, you go online and you put your name in and put the information in, link to your portfolio. One call out I wanted to make was that it's a good idea to reach out to recruiters or people that you sort of kind of maybe know. Maybe they accepted your LinkedIn request that you coincidentally sent them right after applying. Like, even though that's like fairly obvious, if you approach them and you ask nicely for advice, they're oftentimes willing to be helpful, especially if you're humble and you actually have a really good portfolio. And what sometimes happens is they're happy to recommend you because it's like they can take the credit for finding you because you're an awesome talent. You don't want to you want to prevent yourself from getting lost in that sea of applications if possible. Okay. But it all comes down to respect. Like you don't want to be too pushy either. Just know what line to walk there, right? So assuming that you've applied and a recruiter gets back to you for an interview, here's what I personally look for when it comes to interviewing candidates. How confident am I that they can do the work? So a lot of this is going to be pre-interview when I'm looking at your portfolio, but it's also based on your answers when I dig in. So if I ask you questions, like technical type questions, does it sound like you know what you're talking about in terms of things like polyflow for animation purposes, video game budgets, that sort of thing? How well can they communicate? This is a big one. If I ask you a question on an interview, do I get a full thought out answer? Or do you not even answer my question half the time? Interviewing isn't easy. It's okay to be nervous. We all get nervous. That's fine. But you still need to prove to me that you can complete a thought. So just make sure that you bring it back in the end and you're really, this might come down to practicing. And one thing about that can help is I recommend that you make a list before the interview of common types of questions and answers to practice with. So you can jot down some keywords or experiences that you've had. And so this is like a very common example of an interview question that will be asked. Tell me about a time when you didn't get along with a coworker and how you resolved it. And so just be prepared to answer something like that. And for some people, They're like, oh yeah, absolutely, I can answer that, no problem. But others are like, oh crap, I didn't expect you to ask me something so specific. So you can even like look on the internet like for the common interview questions, and it's not that uncommon that you will be asked some of those. So practicing those. And the part that I said about keywords previously, I don't know if this all happens to you, but sometimes when I'm put on the spot, I have a hard time finding certain words. So I'll literally like jot down words that like I might forget that are like good keywords. So one of the ones that I use in this interview is nostalgic. For some reason, I can't remember that word, and so I write it down, and that way, if there's an opportunity for me to use it, then I will. Just something that I do personally. Next question is, will they add to the team? Most studios don't want another cog in the wheel. If we need that, we'll just outsource it these days. So what will you add? Maybe you're eager to learn and you have a positive attitude and basic skill set to back up your ability. That's okay. And I remember having a conversation with my lead at Sledgehammer about this. He said that sometimes he preferred people that were new and hadn't worked somewhere else if they were entry level. And that was because he saw them as an empty slate, and they didn't learn bad habits at other studios. So there was nothing to correct. You could just teach them from scratch. And that can be a good thing. If they're talented artists, that's the main thing. So is this role a match for their skill set, and will it keep them happy? So hiring somebody is a lot like matchmaking. It needs to be good on both sides. So will you be happy, or do you just want a job to pay your bills? And the hint here is we don't want people with little interest in the job. I don't think we're going to have any problems with people trying to break into the industry with that one, but you do definitely want to show that you're super thankful for the time and that you're interested in the job any way you can. Are they, and this kind of leads into the next one, are they generally excited about the job? Yeah, tell them that you're thankful for the opportunity and how you think this will be mutually great for you as well as the student, as well as the company. So it's not just good for you, but you provide, the art for them, and that's going to be super helpful. Are they honest and trustworthy? So be careful not to come off as saying all the right answers here. It's okay for you to say you don't know something or that you have a preference that's not in total alignment. People can naturally detect if you're not being genuine. So just be super honest and you'll be all right. I think if you have good intentions, that's going to be fine then. Just be honest. And remember, if you have a positive attitude, people will be attracted to that. So the next one I wanted to cover was art tests. So if you're newer to the game industry, you might need to take an art test. So first thing I want to mention was be realistic in what you can create in a given time. If you have too much going on in your personal life to commit to an art test, be honest about that. That's fair. I mean, if you're just sprung with an art test, you might not be able to do it right away. Ask for help and clarity. Part of this test can be, how do you work? The worst mistake that people I see already in the game industry make is during production, they run off and make the totally wrong thing. So if I asked you to make a leather jacket and they made some puffy jacket or something, like it'd be all work and time wasted. So you want to be 100% sure about making the right thing. So asking for them to clarify things for you is a good thing. If you're unsure, of course. Never submit late. So you lose trust if you don't communicate, if you're running late. And this is part of, the first thing that I mentioned of not committing to something that you can't complete. Ask if check-ins are okay. When working in the games industry, your lead will ask you to check in from time to time to make sure you're on track. And usually you'll get feedback then. On an art test, if they have the bandwidth to do it, they might appreciate you doing that. It can give them insight into your potential working relationship, as well as help you do better on the test. So they might not want to do this. They might not have the bandwidth for it. But actually, I think if someone were to ask that question, it would be, in my opinion, a well-informed question. And it shows that they sort of know about this stuff, So at the very least, I think it would be it would be helpful just that you're thinking about it and you know it. Don't fall for scams. So there's a lot of mods out there and low budget devs that will promise you the world if you give them free art. Don't trust them if they aren't 100% legit. Or at least if you're going to do that, know that it's charity work and that you're just doing it to help them out. You'll hear all the time people say stuff like, when the game ships, you'll get like 10% of the proceeds or something. Like, I never really believed that. I think I worked on some games that might have shipped back in the day, and I just forgot about it. I wasn't expecting to get anything from them. Get fresh eyes. Take a screenshot of your work and flip it horizontal. The old flippity flu trick. Ask if friends or family members, ask them what they think. Reach out to other artists for feedback. But of course, respect NDA. Like, you can't go posting that on social media, I'm sure. Next one, triple check everything is submitted properly. So naming conventions are a big thing in the games industry. Something that I needed to get better at previously. And I did correct at the next job, actually, believe it or not. But it is a serious red flag if the person who is trying to get the job can't follow instructions. Follow-up email. Ask when would be a good time to follow up. Ask them outright. And if you don't hear from them in a couple of weeks, I would absolutely ask kindly for updates, because as unprofessional as it can be for a studio to not get back to you after you do take the time to do an art test, like, that's terrible, but it does happen. And so I wouldn't want that to happen to any of you. Art takes time. So this is Dying Gladiator by Pierre Julien, one of my favorite sculptures. First point I want to make on this is something that I say. I mentor students on the side from time to time, and I often say this, that training technical skills is not hard, but becoming a master artist takes a lifetime. And I'm personally always seeking ways to improve and to expand my abilities. And just an example of that is I recently took a color theory class because I've been painting these portraits on my iPad a lot lately. So that leads me to my next point. Focus on becoming a better artist. So leaning too hard on technical skills, I think, is a mistake. It's surprising how quickly you'll improve when you focus on the fundamentals of art. Next point. Invest in yourself. Time is the ultimate obstacle. So again, taking the Art Heroes course for me saved me a lot of time and of just stumbling around in the dark, not knowing what I'm doing exactly when it came to like these hyper realistic characters. I worked on realistic stuff at Activision, of course, but we would have head people that worked off scan data, and so I didn't work on any heads at all while I was at Sledgehammer. We worked mostly on all the clothing stuff, so it is the bulk of the character, but a lot of times people see the head and they think you made the entire thing, and we had a process that was more technical for the heads, at least at that studio. So when I took the Art Heroes course, I learned a ton personally, and I felt like that cost was totally inconsequential compared to the time that I saved just trying to figure that out on my own. So it can be really hard to shell out money for a course, but you have to look at the pros and cons and decide what makes sense to you in the end. There is no right or wrong answer there. Next one, never get too comfortable. I've seen coworkers fall into this thing where they're not improving outside of work. Sort of, they're just going to work and going home and forgetting all about art. And I've seen people lose their jobs and have portfolios embarrassingly outdated with no ability to show their current NDA work. So when you work for a company, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be able to show the stuff that you're doing. Probably more than 9 times out of 10, to be fair. So you can't rely on that. And if your work gets too outdated and you haven't been doing stuff in your spare time, you could find yourself in a predicament if you lose your job and you just can't get another job for a while. So basically what I'm saying is don't let that happen to you. find ways to stay motivated. And for me, this is something that's always come pretty easy. I find motivation in everything. I remember always thinking about things through the lens of how can I make this amazing 3D art, and things that inspire me that way, film, concept, games, etc. So the other thing that I like to do is I get on art forums and like ArtStation and just browse every day. Have fun. The final one. So if you're looking at art and creating art, sounds like a chore to you, this might not be the best path for you. But if you love this stuff like me, you can't really think of a much better way to spend your time anyway. So it should be fun, and that makes those sleepless nights not so bad. And on that note, I wanted to say work-life balance is important. And for me personally, it's a constant struggle for me to feel like I'm not slacking on one side or the other. If you're wasting time, though, that's another story. So if you're with your family, I recommend you just be present there. If you're working, try your hardest to stay focused and to optimize your productivity. There's nothing wrong with winding down and watching your favorite show. Just avoid that needless time wasting. So binge watching all of Breaking Bad for the 7th time is probably not the best use of your time, even though it's an amazing show. And that's it for me over here with my presentation. I wanted to open it up for questions. Hannah, does anybody have anything? Oh, I'm not hearing you right now. I think you're muted. Okay.
No, all good, all good. Yeah, we have quite a lot of people asking about software. And so they're saying, what advice would you give to someone who doesn't have subscriptions to premium industry standard software like ZBrush?
Yeah, so I think ZBrush does have, like a month-to-month license. So it is still kind of affordable, I guess. It really depends on your situation. But obviously that stuff does add up. Like if you're getting like Photoshop and all these different things. So yeah, like I do understand that there's like I forget what it's called, but there is like a sort of like a program that's a lot like Photoshop that is free. There's actually like a version of Photoshop that is technically free that they sort of like messed up and gave away at one point. It's like pretty old. And then of course there's Blender, which is totally free. So the cool thing about Blender is it is like it's a legit software, and you can really do just about anything in there. You can sculpt, you can render, you can do like standard poly modeling, you can do effects. So if money is tight, that would absolutely be the route that I would go is Blender, and then sort of maybe start out with Blender and then expand from there as needed.
I'll actually chip into that and say that with ZBrush, you can get a student subscription. I think it makes it really good, like something like $6.99 or $9.99 a month.
Oh yeah. Like I think, don't you all have something like that?
Yeah, so like if you sign on to a art school like us or another one, like normally you get a bunch of like discounts included, which is pretty good for beginners.
Yeah, those are huge.
Yeah. This is something like per year. It's something like it's like a couple of hundred. It's pretty significant from the full price. And so we've got some more questions here. So okay, so as a character artist, is a solid character sculpting skill using ZBrush only enough to land a job in the games industry? Or do you need to learn other programs like Unity or Unreal?
It depends on what you're doing. As a character artist, no. A lot of those things you can sort of learn on the job, because a lot of the times, like what you'll see if you look on a lot of the job applications, it's sort of like if you know Unreal, it's a plus. So if you know those engines, it's always a plus. I don't normally see them saying like you must know that. Also keep in mind when you see an advertisement for a job, they're usually like extra harsh on their requirements. So if you're a really good candidate and maybe it says that you have to have a certain level of experience and you don't have it yet, it doesn't mean that you can't apply. Like I would absolutely hire somebody that proves to me that they're a really solid artist. So it's sort of a thing that people use to keep people who are like terribly, unqualified from applying or discourage them a little bit. But yeah, you can you can definitely still apply. Um, I'm sorry. What was the? Well, I want to come back to the original question because I think I kind of went off on a tangent there. What was that again?
It was asking about software, and it was saying, is it fine to use ZBrush only? Is that enough to land a job in the game industry?
Oh, like for ZBrush specifically. So that is tough. Like, so whenever I see people's portfolios and like it's just all high poly sculpts and stuff, that is like the brunt of the work, for sure. But especially like when you're getting started, you'll probably have to do more of the not so fun stuff. Like ZBrush is usually the most fun stuff that everybody wants to do. So a lot of times you really do. I think you'd be hard pressed to just like for your first job to come in just doing high poly sculpts all the time. Like they're probably going to want to know that you know how to do like the low poly stuff. Because to be fair, like video games is all about optimization. So you need to make like low poly meshes and and understand like how the textures work and PBR workflow and all that stuff. So it's not impossible. I think I recall a couple people doing it. But I would say that those people sort of broke the rules to some sense. It's extremely uncommon getting started. Now, if you've been around for a long, long time, people will absolutely hire you just to do high poly ZBrush stuff.
Okay, so next question. We've got someone asking, is ArtStation the main place for creating professional portfolios, or do recruiters accept any other formats?
Yeah, any format is fine, really. I think a lot of people use ArtStation just because it's like easy and mostly free. So it's become sort of a standard in that way. But whenever I first was applying to studios, I don't think ArtStation didn't even exist. And so like I personally for a long, long time had my own portfolio that I just made myself. And I literally just went online and basically like copied some format that was out there. On the topic of portfolio, so no, don't worry, you don't have to use just ArtStation. But when it comes to portfolios, always remember, keep your work as easy to view as possible. The longer it takes, the worse. So last thing you want to do is have some like fancy Flash things happening. I don't even know if people use Flash anymore, but if it slows people down or makes it unclear like where your art is, that's a really bad thing. You want it to be as little clicks as possible. So I oftentimes recommend, like if you're making your own portfolio, you can even just do the like scroll format where you literally just like show your best work, like maybe like character, if it's character, some breakdown stuff, next character, some breakdown stuff. And it's literally all scrolling and reading. Like there's no easier way than that. And you can even have like little thumbnails at the top that can speed you through that scrolling. That was the format that I used with my first portfolio, and I always recommend fewest clicks possible, get the information in their face. Some people like home screen pages and stuff, would be like, it's about me and stuff. That's nice, but don't make it harder for people to see your work. Always make it easier to see your work.
And we've got someone asking, they're looking to shift from architecture and product design into the industry. And what's your experience of working with people who started later in their career?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I feel like actually, I knew a few people that did that around the time that I was getting started in the game industry, and they're pretty solid artists. Like they had a really good understanding of modeling and working in 3D. One of the biggest challenges I feel like with 3D is it takes some time to sort of wrap your brain around like working in 3 dimensions instead of 2. Like it's 2 seems more intuitive. So once you start to like really see the shapes and how they translate from 2D to 3D, that is a huge skill. So I feel like if you're coming from architecture, that's a big advantage. Also, a lot of people from architecture, they have a really good understanding of like lighting and rendering. And that's another thing when it comes to your portfolio work, like do not cut corners on rendering, because like that's your end product. Like that's what's going to make it look best. You can have an amazing model and it's like just rendered like garbage and it'll look like garbage and people will think it's garbage, but it could be awesome. So rendering is huge and you have that advantage coming from that background as well. So I think making that transition is very doable. Yeah.
And is niching down or specializing in something such as hair a good way to get your foot into the industry door as a junior character artist?
Yeah, you know, I've seen some people doing that because like I said in this presentation, is like I troll the hell out of ArtStation. So like I've seen plenty of people. I've literally witnessed people like kind of start out when they're posting their work and eventually become sort of known as 3D groomers. And I think that that's like a really great way to get in if that's the route you want to go. It is pretty technical, but if you have great attention to detail and you're patient and you can kind of deal with the technical side of things, I think it's actually a really good way to go. So yeah, it's worth a shot. If it's something that you think that you can sit down and really, put a ton of love into, then I would say go for it. That would be pretty cool.
And we've got a couple of people asking for more information on art tests interviews. We had one person asking how much time they should dedicate to the project they're working on for an art test, considering there's maybe thousands of other applicants.
Mm-hmm.
And the other question was about, could you give an example of a technical question during an interview?
Sure. A technical question. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, I guess technical questions would be more so like me just like usually what I'll do, to be fair, is like I'll have like literally like stuff that I'll like look up the candidate that's applying and I'll sort of prepare ahead of time and I'll have all kinds of questions like specifically catered to that person. So I'm literally not just like making things up as I go like I would be right now. But like a technical question might be that I'm just like sort of starting to dig into like, okay, so what programs do you use? Oh, you use Substance Painter. Like, what does your workflow look like with that? Oh, you set up the bakes in Painter. Like, how does that work for you? Like, do you not have issues with the ray casting in that program? And like, so you can start asking specific questions as the conversation goes on, and sort of like you can really quickly figure out like, do they know what they're talking about, if they're using the right language and stuff. And sometimes like they might be nervous and it's clear that they are and they're kind of fumbling around, but you can still see through it. Like if they know it, they know it. If they don't, they don't. As far as like specific technical questions, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but yeah, I mean, like the best way to prepare for that is just to sort of is to know your role, of what you're applying for, So if they say that you're going to be working with ZBrush and Substance Painter and Maya, just be sure that like you know that stuff. Or if you don't know something in there, then be open and honest about it, So that would be my advice. And
art tests, how long to spend on these?
Yeah. So as far as time on an art test, like I don't know exactly how it goes now most of the time, but I remember taking art tests and it was usually like about a week that they would give me, and I would just like pour as much time into it during that week if I could. So if I had like a job or something, I would try to figure out a way that I could take off for a week and just work on it as much as I can. I do remember that at one point I was given an art test and that wasn't an option for me. And so I think it was actually because I was already working in the game industry. And so like, this was like earlier on in my career there. And so I told them that like I can only dedicate a few hours, you know, every other night or something like that. And they're like, okay, well, just kind of like keep me posted on it. And look, how long do you think it would take you? And so they were kind of working with me on that schedule. So it is definitely a case by case situation. But for me personally, like I never want to feel like I'm giving them something that's not my best work, and that usually just means that I'm going to put as much work as I possibly can into it for an art test. And it can really suck. You can basically not get sleep for a while, but I think it is worth like doing as much as you can. You feel comfortable with.
And is there a specific position to look out for or apply for when you're new and you want to learn as much as possible, like certain keywords?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people do still recommend like consider doing props or environment art first. Sometimes those aren't as exciting to people as some other roles, but also look for the word generalist, the 3D generalist. That's a good one. But it is also like it's much easier, I feel, to get like a starting job there. And again, like I would just, as much as you can prove out that you can do these sorts of things. So like, let's say you wanted to work on you wanted to work on stylized type games for Blizzard or something. If it was one of those like World of Warcraft games, like I think they're still doing all hand painted stuff. So I would just work on hand painted stuff like crazy, you know, and try to make all kinds of like little props and stuff just at the same quality of what they make for that game. And if you can do that, then like anybody looking for that, it doesn't necessarily have to be Blizzard. Anybody looking for that is looking for that style, you can just be a shoo-in at that point. So, but if you're doing more like general stuff, it's gonna be easier than like characters or something specific like weapons or something like that.
And where have you found the best places to look for work? See job listings, things like that.
Yeah, you know, I think that like Google searching a lot of times, or LinkedIn or ArtStation. I don't really personally do anything too fancy for that. Like, it's really just like those main places. And I think like a lot of times that's where studios are likely to post their advertisements, is in easily accessible places. There's some weird ones that like sometimes come up, like Indeed and stuff, that you might not expect, but overall, like if you do like a Google search for like jobs in 3D generalist, I think that like Google is smart enough that it'll tell you like based on your location, things that are out there.
Cool. Okay, that's pretty much all of the questions. If anyone else has got another question, write it in the comments now. Well, we've still got Brad.
Yeah, I've got this. That's my thank you slide there. That's my official final slide.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So, how's it looking? Do we have any more?
No. Okay, right. So everyone, we're going to raffle off one of our programs. It's Toonie Characters program. And we're going to do this by kind of like picking a name out of a hat, sort of. I mean, we can't do that. Brad is going to choose a name.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Brad, can you see the comments on YouTube?
Oh, yeah. Let me.
Can you see them? Okay.
Yes, I can.
Scroll through those.
I'm gonna literally like. There's no preferences here. I'm gonna close my eyes.
Yes.
And just go somewhere, and whichever one's at the top.
Good idea.
That's it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Erwin Sue.
Okay, cool. Okay, please get in touch with us Can you write the name in private chat to me as well? Please get in touch with us if that was you. You can drop us a message on Instagram and I will give you the link to get the Toonie Characters program full scholarship for free.
Sweet. Yeah, I definitely wanted to thank everybody for taking the time to listen to me. I hope that it was entertaining as well as informative. I don't know, am I the only one that thinks some of that stuff is funny? It's totally possible. And definitely thank you so much, Hannah. Like, I really appreciate all this for setting it all up. So
yeah, thank you for coming on. It was really, 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 really good. Everyone here is saying how awesome it was. Oh, we had one question actually. This is pretty key.
Yeah, sure.
Someone asked if they could have a copy of your presentation.
Yeah, I'm totally happy as long as you all are okay with that, Hannah. Yeah, that's totally cool.
That would be fantastic.
See all my nonsense notes and stuff.
Yeah, so yeah, we'll organize that after this and everyone can expect it in the email that will come after this session, all right? So it will be the email with the replay link and then you'll see the replay and then you will also see the link to grab the portfolio. Cool. Okay, all right, thank you everyone. Join us again tomorrow at, let me remind myself, 1 second. Yeah, 7th September. 9 a.m. PDT. There we go. We're all on different time zones, so it's a bit like, ooh.
No time for me.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you. Goodbye.
See ya.